Party accusing the Labour pressure group Momentum of forcing serving Labour councillors off the ballot paper for re-election in favour of their own candidates. Sources close to Momentum argue they're simply helping reflect the new makeup of the Labour Party. So is there any truth to these allegations? Elizabeth Glinke has been to Brighton to find out.
They say to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And in the Labour Party in Brighton, they're very close indeed.
Here, as in many other parts of the country, there are suggestions that Momentum is attempting to seize control and ultimately replace sitting councillors with candidates of their own choosing.
2 weeks ago, Momentum won all 9 positions on the committee which will organise the selection of Labour candidates for the next city council elections in 2019. Local activists have spoken about installing the first socialist council in the city, the implication being that the current Labour council is not quite socialist enough.
If you talk to people from Momentum, they will say to you, we have brought in all these new members, they are full of enthusiasm. Why shouldn't we have our people moving in to take over the party? We are the future of the party.
Well, look, Momentum have a role to play in the Brighton and Hove Party, and I welcome all the new members. But what we can't have is people trying to be part of the Labour Party who are expelled or suspended for any reason, who can then drift back into Momentum and try and influence Labour policies in Brighton and Hove. That would be wholly wrong.
Is there bullying going on in Brighton?
I think there has been. And I think that has predominantly been from people who are outside the Labour Party, and it's not acceptable.
Would it be accurate to say that Momentum members and some of the new Labour Party members are mobilising against the existing councillors?
I think there's been some chatter about that, and a lot of that has been from those who are not in the party at the present time. Once people are not members of the Labour Party, they can't share our values, and therefore they should be excluded from Momentum. And that would be a way to unify the party in Brighton and Hove and around the country.
As a former minister in the Blair government, you might expect Ivor Kaplan to take that view. But I spoke to a number of Labour Party members who said they'd experienced intimidation and that Momentum was authoritarian and brutal to existing councillors. None would agree to appear on camera. While I was in Brighton, a Momentum activist posted this video on social media. The faces of 3 Labour councillors, including the council leader, had been superimposed, something I put to local Momentum organiser Greg Hadfield, who's currently suspended from the Labour Party.
I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to comment on it. That's not...
But would you think that that is...
I'm happy to get back to you and have a considered view, but I haven't seen it.
I have spoken to a number of people across the party in Brighton and Hove, some of whom tell me that Momentum are using bullying tactics, that the party is very divided and that they feel not able to speak up and air their views.
They're saying that on the record, aren't they? Because I think that's shocking smears. What we've seen in Brighton and Hove the last 18 months is a massive upsurge in democratic, decent democratic engagement with party members. Anyone who says that, well, first of all, they're lying, but also they don't have the best interests of the party.
Would you like to get rid of the current cohort of councillors in Brighton and Hove, the Labour councillors?
I'd love it for members to elect the best representatives of this Labour Party they can. Now, if that's bullying, if that's undemocratic, if that's deselecting, then people saying that have a very strange view of democracy.
Overnight, Labour suspended the member who posted the video. He denied it was anti-Semitic and issued an apology. Away from Brighton, the deselection of Labour councillors in Haringey and a number of other London boroughs has made the national press. There have been deselections in other places too, including Hastings and Manchester, where the former mayor is amongst the casualties.
Well, I think we need a cultural message from the top. Momentum clearly have a place in the Labour movement now. Although they're not affiliated with the party formally, they've brought energy and ideas to the party. That's no bad thing. But Jeremy Corbyn is not just the party leader, but the figurehead of Momentum, who was set up to serve him, has to send a message to all his troops, if you like, around the country, saying perhaps, not in my name.
Having spoken to people from across the Labour Party here in Brighton, there are those that will tell you that the party is more united than ever before and they're incredibly positive about the future. But on the other side, even people who describe themselves as being on the left say they feel despondent and that the atmosphere can only be described as toxic.
Well, we asked Momentum if someone could come into the studio to discuss the issues raised in that film, but sadly nobody was available. Never mind, we've got our panel of experts here who can discuss the issues that were raised. I'll come to you first, Helen. Is it perfectly legitimate for Momentum to try and get their own candidates selected? Because they're in the ascendancy in the party now, and why shouldn't they have more of their people on councils and as candidates?
Yes, that is legitimate. They have an ideological position within the Labour Party, and they're entitled to try and push that forward. There are three things that bother people about Momentum. The first is that it is controlled by two private limited companies. All the data is essentially in the hands of one man. The second thing is that grew out of the Jeremy for Labour campaign. Unlike other sort of factions, you might sort of talk about Progress or the Fabians, it's not about advancing an ideology, it's very much around Jeremy Corbyn as a person. And the third thing that upsets people is they're very successful at what they do. In terms of making viral videos, for example, they are an incredibly effective organising force. So that's why people are so worried about them.
I mean, Toby, in some ways, I mean, Momentum do show the way that politics is going. They're fantastic at mobilising people, at reaching their supporters and doing it in different ways. Do you think that centrists in the Labour Party are frightened by their success?
Well, they are definitely frightened by their success, and that's one of the reasons they haven't been able to put up a better fight. To claim that this isn't undemocratic because votes are being taken before Momentum then secures control of parties like the Brighton and Hove Labour Party is absurd. I mean, it's undemocratic because effectively a small neo-Marxist cult would be holding the parliamentary Labour Party to ransom. That's what makes it undemocratic. It doesn't matter whether the cultists themselves are able to sit out at these meetings for kind of hours on end till 2 in the morning when moderates have to go home. That doesn't make the takeover of the Labour Party by this tiny hard-left neo-Marxist cult democratic. It is patently undemocratic, as it would be if Britain First, for instance, took over the Conservative Party.
Well, that's pretty strong stuff. Is it fair, Tim?
Well, I think the thing that's wrong about it is calling it tiny, and I think the problem for the moderates in the Labour Party is that it's not tiny at all anymore. If you look at the general election, the vast bulk of people who were on the streets campaigning for Labour involved Momentum, and if you look at their social media operation, the most startling statistic from the general election is that something like 60% of voters saw a Momentum video in their Facebook feeds during that general election campaign, and Momentum spent £2,000. That's it on it. And everything else spread virally. There's a popularity here. Yes, there are a bunch of old sort of lefty Marxists, the sort of Leninists, and on the other side there's the new sort of crowd of people cheerleading for Jeremy Corbyn, the John Lennonists, as they call them. These two groups have come together, and it's a very powerful force. And no wonder that the Blairites and the moderates are worried
But
about
these accusations of bullying are quite damaging, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's always a problem, and what is discordant is that you've got all these very sort of optimistic people who want to change the world tied up with a group of people who are very effective organisers and behave, frankly, in a pretty substandard way a lot of the time.
Look, I think to compare them with Britain First is way over the top. I do think there has been a problem in the last couple of years with the Labour Party being overlooking anti-Semitism, certainly not being overtly hard on it. But to compare it with an organisation whose explicit purpose is to advance racist propaganda is a little unfair.
OK, well, we'll leave that there for